Listen, folks, I need to tell you about a case that's going to absolutely blow your mind. This is a story about obsession, genius-level planning, and one tiny mistake that unraveled everything. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand how a brilliant MIT graduate student planned what he thought was the perfect murder, and how he almost got away with it. Now, before we dive deep into this chilling tale, I want you to do me a favor. If this story grabs you, and I promise you it will, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who appreciates true crime stories that sound too calculated to be real. It's December 2020 in New Haven, Connecticut, and something strange is happening in this quiet university town. You know New Haven, it's home to Yale University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. It's the kind of place where you expect intellectual debates and academic excellence, not violent crime. But Detective David Zanoni and his partner Stephen Cunningham were about to deal with something very unusual. On December 11, 2020, they got their first call. 5 gunshots had been fired into a residence on Huntington Street. The house was occupied, a family was inside, but miraculously, nobody was hit. When police arrived, they found multiple .45 caliber shell casings scattered at the scene. Now, a shooting in any neighborhood is concerning, but this is where things get interesting. Because this wasn't an isolated incident. January 15, 2021, another shooting. Different location, same story. Bullets fired into an occupied home, .45 caliber casings left behind. Nobody hurt, thank God, but you can imagine how terrifying that is for the families involved. February 5, 2021, it happens again. Third shooting. Another residence peppered with gunfire while people are inside. Once again, .45 caliber shells at the scene. And then, February 6, 2021, a fourth incident. This time, 5 rounds were shot into yet another occupied home. The pattern was unmistakable now. Someone was systematically shooting at houses in the New Haven area, and the police were scrambling to figure out who and why. Detective Zanoni later said, for shootings over a few months, do they have anything in common? The common denominator was the caliber of the gun that was used. It's .45 caliber casings that were located at all 4 of those scenes. And in the last 2 shootings, there was a description of a dark-colored SUV. Officers were deeply concerned. It was only a matter of time before someone got seriously hurt, or killed. Paul and Nazie White were victims of that third shooting. Paul, an educator with degrees from Yale, Harvard, and Columbia University, was sitting in his living room after dinner when bullets came crashing through his window. His wife Nazie, a school teacher, was upstairs taking a shower. Paul yelled for her to get down, and she heard another shot upstairs, the door frame splintering right near her. They were lucky to be alive. But why were they targeted? They had no idea. They weren't involved in any disputes, had no enemies that they knew of. It was completely random, or so it seemed. The police were baffled. These shootings didn't make sense. The victims had nothing in common. They weren't connected to each other. There was no obvious motive. But someone out there had a plan, and that plan was about to culminate in something far more sinister. February 6, 2021. The same day as that fourth shooting. Just 1 hour later, at approximately 8 p.m., everything would change. It's 8:30 on a cold Saturday night in February. Residents in the East Rock neighborhood of New Haven hear the distinct, unmistakable sound of gunfire. Multiple 911 calls flood into the police dispatcher. Shots fired at Lawrence and Nickel Street. Officers rush to the scene, and what they find is absolutely heartbreaking. Lying in the middle of the street is a young man, 26-year-old Kevin Jiang, a graduate student at Yale School of Environment. He's been shot multiple times. His body is still warm, but it's too late. Kevin is pronounced dead at the scene. Detective Zanoni and Detective Cunningham arrive at the crime scene within minutes. The patrol officers have already cordoned off the area, knocking on doors, looking for witnesses, anyone who might have seen or heard something. When the detectives approach Kevin's body, still covered with a white sheet, they can immediately see this wasn't just a shooting. This was something far more personal. We could see contact wounds to his upper body and to his head, Zanoni later recalled. There was stippling on the left side of his head. Stippling, that's the burn pattern caused by gunpowder exploding from a weapon fired at extremely close range. Someone had stood over Kevin and shot him repeatedly. 8.45 caliber shell casings were scattered around the scene. 8 shots. And scattered approximately 100 feet down the street was Kevin's car, a Prius, just sitting in the middle of the road with its hazard lights flashing. Crime scene detectives noticed something peculiar about Kevin's Prius. There was damage to the rear bumper, an impression that looked like it came from a license plate holder. It appeared Kevin's car had been struck from behind. Witnesses started coming forward, and their accounts painted a chilling picture. One witness said she heard what sounded like a minor car accident and went to her window to look. She saw the Prius come to a stop and turn on its hazard lights. Then she saw a dark-colored SUV pull up behind it and reverse back toward the intersection. She watched as Kevin got out of his Prius and walked toward the SUV, most likely, investigators figured, to exchange insurance information after what seemed like a minor fender bender. That's when she heard the first round of gunshots. Another witness heard those shots and rushed to her window. What she saw was even more horrifying. She saw someone dressed all in black standing over another person who was lying on the ground. Then she heard more gunshots and could see the muzzle flash as the gun fired again and again. Think about that for a second, folks. Kevin was already down on the ground, likely already dying, and someone continued to shoot him. This wasn't about defending yourself. This wasn't a fight that got out of hand. This was execution-style murder. There's a little bit more to it, Detective Zanoni said. It seems a little bit more personal when you have someone that's laying on the ground and not moving. What would cause someone to continue firing at them? The detectives were able to confirm these witness accounts when they reviewed footage from a neighbor's security camera. The video was grainy, the camera was positioned inside a window facing outward, and most of the frame showed the reflection of the interior of the house. But when they zoomed in on what was happening on the street, they could see it all unfold. First, you hear the collision between the two vehicles. Then Kevin's Prius pulls into frame, followed by the SUV pulling up behind him. The SUV then reverses out of frame. You see Kevin exit his vehicle and walk toward the SUV, presumably to talk to the driver about the accident. Then you hear 2 gunshots. A scream. And then 6 more shots in rapid succession. Moments later, the video shows the SUV driving off into the night. Can you make out any details about the SUV? Investigators were asked. Unfortunately not, they said. You could kind of get the idea of the potential make and model with the tail lights, but you couldn't discern any identifying features. But they did have those .45 caliber shell casings. And almost immediately, investigators wondered, could this murder be connected to those earlier shootings? The 4th house shooting had happened just 1 hour before Kevin's murder. Same caliber. Same dark SUV description. If you're finding this story as gripping as I think you are, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this case so far. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss how this all unfolds. Word of Kevin's murder spread quickly through the Yale community and beyond. For those who knew him, the news was absolutely devastating. It still doesn't feel real, one friend said. He's such a cutie. He was just a very happy person, a very genuine soul. Kevin Jiang wasn't just any graduate student. He was someone special. Originally from Chicago, Kevin was an Army veteran who had served in the National Guard. He was deeply committed to his faith, his family, and his studies. Just 1 week before his murder, he had posted on Facebook about the joy of getting engaged to his girlfriend, Zion Perry. Oh wow, he was so in love with Zion, a friend recalled. He was just like, oh, Zion this and Zion that. Everything was about Zion. He really loved her. Lieutenant Naja Hubbard, who served with Kevin in the Army National Guard, remembered him as someone with a genuinely kind heart. I remember one time he was on the phone with her, and I was like, wow. You could hear the genuineness and his love toward her. I was like, wow, I hope I find someone like that. Kevin and Zion had met in January 2020 at a Christian retreat. Zion was an undergraduate at MIT at the time, and Kevin was already at Yale. They connected over their shared faith and their passion for science. Zion was studying molecular biophysics and biochemistry, while Kevin was in Yale's School of Environment. They were both brilliant, hard-working students who didn't define themselves solely by their academic accomplishments. They both loved nature, a friend said. They're both brilliant and hard-working students, and yet they didn't feel like their accomplishments were what defined them at the deepest level. On the day he was killed, Kevin and Zion had spent the entire day together. They went ice fishing, had dinner at her house, and then around 8:30 p.m., Kevin left to drive home. He didn't get far. Just 2 blocks from Zion's house, his car was struck by that dark SUV, and his life was brutally taken from him. Zion actually heard the gunshots. But she thought there was a good 5 or 10 minutes between when Kevin left and when she heard the shots, so she didn't think he was anywhere near the area. She had no idea that the love of her life was lying in the street, bleeding out, just 2 blocks away. When detectives Zanoni and Cunningham went to Kevin's home to notify his family, they were met by his mother, Linda Liu. It's the conversation every detective dreads having. It's got to be the hardest conversation, Zanoni said. They always are. You want to be direct and upfront and make it clear, as horrific as it is for them. He told Linda that Kevin had been shot and killed on Lawrence and Nickel Street. She couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. She fell to the ground, crying, absolutely devastated. Kevin and his mother had always been close. It was just the 2 of them for most of his childhood. Linda, a divorced single parent, had worked tirelessly to support her son through a difficult childhood where he was often bullied. She was deeply committed to seeing him through those tough times, and eventually, he thrived. Pastor Gregory Hendrickson, who knew both Kevin and Linda from Trinity Baptist Church, said Kevin had a sense of wanting to honor his mother for everything she'd done for him. In 2019, Kevin bought a house and invited his mother, who had been living alone on the other side of the country, to come live with him while he completed his studies at Yale. She didn't have a lot of family support around her, and he wanted her to come and be with him, Pastor Hendrickson explained. Now, Kevin was gone. Murdered in a senseless act of violence. And Linda was left with only memories and unanswered questions. Who would do this to her son? And why? Detectives Zanoni and Cunningham worked through the night after Kevin's murder, interviewing witnesses, reviewing evidence, and trying to piece together what had happened. But by the end of that first night, they didn't have much to go on. It seemed like just an innocent guy, Zanoni recalled. Did you think this was going to be a tough case that night? Yes, we had a little bit, but there wasn't a lot to go on. But then, just 15 hours after the shooting, they got a phone call that would change everything. The call came from the North Haven Police Department, a neighboring town just a few miles away. And what they had to say was incredible. 2 incidents had occurred in North Haven, one the night before, right around the time Kevin was killed, and another that morning. And they might be connected to the murder. It started with a 911 call to the North Haven police around 9 p.m. on February 6, less than half an hour after Kevin was shot. A security guard at Sims Metal Management, a scrap metal yard, called to report that someone had driven through the yard. I just had somebody drive through my yard here, the guard said. They didn't know where they were going, so I had been chasing them around the yard, and they just pulled way in the back off the property. Like a black minivan SUV type of thing. When Sergeant Jeffrey Mills and Officer Marcus Oresco arrived, they found a dark-colored GMC SUV stuck on snow-covered railroad tracks not far from the rear exit of the scrapyard. Police body camera footage captured the encounter. The officers approached the stuck vehicle and found the driver sitting inside. "How you doing?" Officer Mills asked. "Not good," the driver replied. "What are you doing back here?" "I just got in here accidentally and I got stuck." The driver was 29-year-old Qinxuan Pan, a graduate student from Manhunt, Massachusetts. He appeared calm and cooperative. His driver's license and criminal background were clean. During the encounter, Sergeant Mills noticed a few things in the vehicle: a yellow jacket on the passenger seat, a blue bag, and a briefcase in the back seat. But nothing seemed particularly suspicious. Pan explained that he had taken a wrong turn, got lost, and thought the security guard was chasing him. It seemed like a reasonable explanation. People got lost and ended up on those railroad tracks all the time. "He doesn't look like he's trying to scrap anything," Mills told his partner. He wasn't nervous at all. He was perfectly calm. They called a tow truck to get Pan's SUV off the tracks, and the tow truck driver gave Pan a ride to the nearby Best Western Hotel. Pan checked in, paid with a credit card, and that was that. Just another routine call. But the next morning, February 7th, around 11 a.m., there was another 911 call. This time, it came from an employee at the Arby's restaurant right next door to the Best Western. "We found a gun and probably like 10 boxes of bullets," the employee said. There were 3 bags left on the grass at the north entrance. When Officer Mills arrived and looked at the bags, something clicked. There was a blue retail bag with a Massachusetts logo on it, and a small black leather briefcase. "It instantly hit me," Mills said. "These are the bags that were in Mr. Pan's car the night before." Mills opened the bags and what he found inside was shocking: a .45 caliber handgun, ammunition, and a yellow jacket. By then, Mills had heard about the murder in New Haven. He knew police were looking for a dark-colored SUV, and the victim had been shot with a .45 caliber weapon. And here he had a dark-colored GMC SUV driven by a man who had abandoned bags containing a .45 caliber gun and ammunition just hours after the murder. Mills immediately checked with the Best Western. Yes, Qinxuan Pan had checked in the night before. And no, he hadn't checked out yet. Mills alerted New Haven Homicide, and Detective Zanoni immediately sent detectives to the Best Western. They got a key to Pan's room 276, and knocked on the door. No answer. They entered the room and found it completely clean. It didn't appear that anyone had stayed there overnight. "At first we were like, oh, we lost him," Zanoni recalled. Little did they know, the manhunt for Qinxuan Pan was just beginning. With Qinxuan Pan now missing, Detective Zanoni turned to his computer. The first thing he wanted to know was, who is this guy, and is there any connection between him and Kevin Jiang? Zanoni found Pan's Facebook page, but it was mostly inactive. His last post was from 2016, and there were just a few photos with other students. Nothing particularly revealing. But then Zanoni started scrolling through Pan's friends list. Kevin Jiang wasn't on the list. But someone else was, Zion Perry, Kevin's fiancée. "Now we have a connection," Zanoni said. Zanoni immediately contacted Zion and asked her about Pan. She explained that they had met at MIT back in 2019. They were more acquaintances than friends, nothing romantic at all. The last time she had spoken to him was in May 2020, when he reached out through Facebook Messenger to congratulate her on graduating from MIT. He had asked to FaceTime with her, and she politely declined. "She must have been wondering why you're asking her so many questions about this guy," the interviewer said to Zanoni. "She was," Zanoni replied. "And that's when I told her that he was a person of interest in this." She was completely shocked. He was barely a part of her life, and why he would have been involved with this in any way. But when Zanoni looked at Zion's Facebook page, things started to make more sense. The last things she had posted publicly were photos and updates about her engagement to Kevin. There were pictures of the proposal, of her showing off her ring, of her and Kevin together. "Are you starting to formulate a theory about the case that goes a little beyond possible road rage?" the interviewer asked. "Yes," Zanoni said. It did seem like there was a secret obsession of Pan's going on behind the scenes that Kevin wasn't aware of and that Zion wasn't aware of. Meanwhile, Detective Joe Galvin, a member of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force in Connecticut, was dispatched to Malden, Massachusetts, to try to locate Pan. Galvin went to the home where Pan lived with his parents. It was a very affluent area with nice homes. But when he knocked on the door, no one answered. So the day after the homicide, we were unsure if maybe the family was on vacation, out of state, out of the country, Galvin said. But we were also worried, given the heinous act that occurred in New Haven the day before. Were they potentially kidnapped by their own son? Were they victims of another horrible crime? It was a terrifying possibility. But as the days went by without any sign of Pan or his parents, investigators began to suspect something else entirely, that Pan's parents were helping him evade capture. As investigators dug deeper into Qinxuan Pan's background, a chilling picture began to emerge. This wasn't a crime of passion or a spur-of-the-moment act of violence. This was carefully planned and methodically executed by someone with a genius-level intellect. Pan was an MIT graduate with a degree in computer science. He was currently a grad student studying artificial intelligence. His attorney would later describe him as very smart, genius, when it came to academics, but socially, not a genius. The marshals discovered that Pan had 3 active cell phones, which immediately raised red flags. Why would someone need 3 phones? And what they discovered about Pan's activities in the months leading up to Kevin's murder was absolutely stunning. Pan had been contacting car dealerships throughout the New Haven area. He would tell them all the same story. He wanted to test drive a vehicle because he was going on a camping trip. The dealerships would hand over the keys, and Pan would take the vehicles out for extended test drives. Investigators were able to match the dates of Pan's test drives with the dates of the 4 shootings into homes in New Haven, the ones that had occurred before Kevin's murder. Do you understand what this means? Pan wasn't just planning to kill Kevin. He was creating a pattern. He was firing shots into random homes using .45 caliber ammunition, leaving shell casings at the scene, all while driving test drive vehicles that couldn't be traced back to him. He was building a false narrative so that when Kevin was eventually killed, investigators would think it was just another random shooting in a series of random shootings. He planned it, and he knew we'd be looking at these other things, one investigator said. He did his best to mislead us. And now we knew that yes, this wasn't a random incident out there, Kevin was targeted. The level of planning was extraordinary. Pan had spent months setting up this elaborate scheme. He had test-driven multiple vehicles. He had fired shots into homes where he had no connection to the occupants. He had obtained weapons and ammunition. All of this was designed to make Kevin's murder look like it was part of a pattern of random violence. But Pan made one critical mistake. And that mistake would ultimately lead to his capture. Remember that gun and ammunition that was found in the bags outside Arby's? Forensic testing revealed that Pan's DNA was on both the gun and the ammunition. And even more damning, Kevin's blood was found on Pan's hat and on the gear shift of the SUV Pan was driving the night Kevin was murdered. But here's the thing, the gun recovered at Arby's wasn't the murder weapon. It was a different .45 caliber handgun. Where was the actual gun used to kill Kevin? To this day, no one knows. Pan has never revealed what he did with that weapon. The U.S. Marshals, led by Supervisor Matthew Duffy and Deputy Marshal Kevin Perot, were now leading a nationwide manhunt for Qinxuan Pan. This was a high-profile case that was getting national media attention, and the pressure was enormous. Because this became so high-profile so fast, it was heightened, one of the marshals explained. 5 weeks passed without a solid lead. And then, something happened that changed everything. Remember, Pan's mother had told police that she believed her son had walked into the woods in Georgia and killed himself. But the marshals were skeptical. They noticed that Pan's parents had a lot of banking activity, large cash withdrawals, sometimes $5,000 or $10,000 at a time. That's a large sum of money that someone could use to get out of the country, investigators noted. And Pan's parents still had family in China, which raised concerns that Pan might try to flee the country. Then Pan's parents rented a car and started traveling again, but this time the vehicle's GPS system that the marshals were tracking went dark. Someone had disabled it. And investigators knew that Pan had previously disabled GPS systems in the test drive vehicles he used during his shooting spree. At one point, surveillance cameras at a Georgia mall recorded Pan's father purchasing a computer. And about 10 minutes later, they saw an individual fitting Pan's description entering the same store. So the story of the suicide out in the woods, that's not true, the marshals concluded. Pan's parents eventually traveled back north to Connecticut, and the GPS on their rental car came back online. We felt the clock was really ticking, one investigator said. And it ticked away for nearly 2 more months until May 4, 2021, when Pan's parents made a third road trip. But this time, they were traveling with another couple, likely, investigators believed, to make it appear that this was just a regular vacation with friends, not a trip to help their fugitive son. Pan's parents and the other couple were eventually tracked to a North Carolina hotel. After they checked out, investigators interviewed a hotel clerk who told them something remarkable. Late one night, Pan's mother had come to the desk and asked to borrow his phone to make a call. After she made the call, she deleted the number from the phone. But the marshals were able to recover that deleted number, and they tracked it to a boarding house near Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama. "See, you guys are closing in," the interviewer said. "Yeah," the marshal replied with a slight smile. The marshals went to Montgomery with what one investigator described as a small army, around 20 guys. They found Pan's room and knocked on the door. Pan opened the door and said, "I'm who you're looking for." Just like that, after nearly 3 months on the run, Qinxuan Pan was in custody. He had approximately $20,000 in cash on him, his father's passport, 7 SIM cards, and multiple communication devices. It was a huge relief for everyone involved. But the case was far from over. Qinxuan Pan was arrested for the murder of Kevin Jiang and brought back to Connecticut. He maintained his innocence, but a judge ordered him held on a $20 million bond. His case was delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic, but during that time, investigators continued to amass evidence. The license plate imprint on Kevin's car matched the plate on Pan's SUV. Pan's DNA was on the gun and ammunition found at Arby's. Kevin's blood was on Pan's clothing and in his vehicle. The shell casings from all the shootings, including Kevin's murder, matched. It was, as prosecutor Stacey Miranda later said, overwhelming evidence. Pan's lawyer, William Gerace, agreed. The evidence was so overwhelming that he recommended Pan cut a deal. On February 29, 2024, 3 years after Kevin's killing, Pan pled guilty to murder in exchange for serving 35 years in prison without parole. At his sentencing in April, Pan sat silently as Kevin's loved ones described their loss. Kevin's mother, Linda, had some of her remarks read by a family friend because she was too emotional to speak. But then she found the strength to address Pan directly. 35 years in prison is too short and too light, she said, her voice breaking. Lieutenant Hubbard from the National Guard spoke about how much Kevin meant to everyone who knew him. Friends and fellow soldiers described the hole Kevin's death had left in their lives. And then Zion Perry stood up to speak. The courtroom was silent as she addressed the man who had murdered her fiancé. "I wanted to address Pan specifically," she said. "Although your sentence is far less than you deserve, there is also mercy. May God have mercy on you, and may He have mercy on all of us." It was an extraordinary moment, a demonstration of grace in the face of unimaginable pain. Pan briefly addressed the court. "Your Honor, what I'm thinking about is my action and the horrible consequences. I feel sorry for what my actions have caused and for everyone affected. I fully accept the penalties the court is going to impose." But he never explained why he killed Kevin. He never revealed where the murder weapon was. He never provided the closure that Kevin's family desperately wanted. Judge Harmon passed sentence, and Pan was led away in handcuffs to begin his 35-year prison term. Investigators considered charging Pan's parents as accessories, but ultimately decided they couldn't prove that they knew Pan had committed murder when they first helped him. But make no mistake, the marshals believe Pan's parents knew exactly what they were doing when they helped him evade capture for nearly 3 months. Now, Kevin's friends and family are left to remember a man of deep faith, boundless love, and incredible potential. Lieutenant Hubbard recalled visiting Kevin's grave after she spoke to investigators. She said she felt Kevin's presence there, a piece of him urging her to carry on and not be sad. "Don't be sad that I'm gone," she felt him saying. "Just keep going." At Kevin's funeral, Pastor Hendrickson had eulogized him with these words, "We come to you today remembering Kevin, grateful for his life, grieving over his loss." Zion read a poem Kevin had written to her that began, "If this world falls apart, it will be all right, because we have each other's hearts." Kevin Jiang was buried with full military honors just 2 days before what would have been his 27th birthday, on Valentine's Day, 2021. His story is a reminder that behind every true crime case is a real person with real dreams, a real family that loves them, and a real community forever changed by their loss. Kevin wanted to make the world a better place. He was studying environmental science because he cared about the planet. He served his country in the military. He loved his mother, his fiancée, and his faith. And his life was stolen by someone consumed with obsession and jealousy, someone who thought he could commit the perfect crime and get away with it. If this story has moved you, I want you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Second, share this video with someone who needs to hear Kevin's story. And third, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this case. Tell me what you think about Pan's sentence. Do you think 35 years is enough? Thank you for listening to Kevin's story with me today. Thank you for caring enough to watch until the end. And thank you for helping to keep his memory alive. God bless Kevin Jiang. God bless his family and friends. And God bless all of you.